Good morning. Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Ann Arbor, Michigan. My name is Carter Smith, and I have the honor of serving this congregation as the Acting Director of Music Ministries. I am joined this morning on our chancel by our worship team, including Reverend Cassandra Hartley, our Executive Minister, Allison, our Pianist-in-Residence, Mike Halerz, our Technology Consultant, and we are also joined by our guest musicians who you just heard provide their gift of music this morning, Leah, Tame, and Keleigh. Welcome to all of you who are gathered here in this space, and to those who are participating via live stream. What a joy it is for us to have the opportunity to be in community with one another this morning. Whether you are a longtime congregant or you are newer to this community, your presence here matters. Thank you for offering the gift of your presence today. If you are newer to this community, we would like to extend a warm welcome to you this morning. If you would like to learn more about us, please consider joining our in-person newcomer welcome, which takes place in the Jackson Chapel after each service. The Jackson Chapel can be found as you exit the sanctuary on the right side of the hallway. Here you can meet members of our community, ask questions, and make new connections. Also, following the service, I invite everyone to pick up a donut to go after you visit one of the many tables that we have in our social hall, which include Sponsor a Child, Scripts, UUSC coffee sales, YRUU apple dumplings, Justice in the Middle East, and the UUAA involvement table. If you are looking for a chance to bring a little holiday cheer to our community, you're in luck. First, order forms for the poinsettias are available on the greeters table this morning. There's a long-standing tradition of filling the sanctuary with poinsettias to honor loved ones. And you have the opportunity to order red, pink, or white two-stem plants for $15 each. Please see the order form to provide honoring information and for payment options. And secondly, you can join in the Sunday Fun Day holiday celebration next Sunday, December 12th, from 12:30 to 1:30. Join us for holiday crafts in the social hall, cocoa and cookies outside with Santa, and decorating the UUAA Christmas tree here in the sanctuary. This morning we honor Hanukkah and all those who celebrate the Jewish Festival of Lights. We do so through our exploration of what it means to practice a fierce joy in the midst of hard times and difficult circumstances. And as we continue this time together and move into our Chalice Lighting, I'm excited to invite up to the chancel our YRUU high schoolers to light our chalice and then say a few words. Go ahead and come forward. And as they come forward, let us turn to the words of our chalice lighting that remind us of the spark of love, hope, and possibility that resides within each of our hearts. Will you please join together in reciting our chalice lighting words? We light this chalice for the light of truth. We light this chalice for the warmth of love. We light this chalice for the energy of action. We light this chalice for the harmony of peace.
Hi, I'm Avalon. And I'm Maya. We're part of YRUU. And today we're having Unicorn Day. We wanted to tell you a little bit about our apple dumplings. So we had a day yesterday where we made them, and they were very fun, and we had a good time. And we are doing a fundraiser with the money from them for Peace Neighborhood, which is a community center that helps community members with social and economic problems, and they have kids make a wish list for 3 holiday gifts, and we, with the money we raise, buy as many of those as we can. So the apple dumplings are vegan and they have local apples, and we would love for you to come buy them after service. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this important reminder. We are a community who is not bound or gathered together by a specific credo or set of beliefs to which we adhere, but instead we are gathered together by the ways in which we are in community with one another. And the spirit of that community is captured by our covenant. Would you join with me in speaking together the words of our community's covenant? The spirit of this church is love, and service is its law. This is our covenant with each other, to dwell together in peace, to search for truth and love, and to help one another. Thank you.
Good morning. So I could not celebrate Hanukkah and the monthly theme of joy without sharing a story that brings me a lot of joy. You may know the author Lemony Snicket, and if you do, then you know that you're in for a treat. And if you don't, you're still in for a treat. So I would love to share a story he wrote for this time of year called The Latke Who Couldn't Stop Screaming, a Christmas story. This story ends in someone's mouth, but it begins in a tiny village more or less covered in snow. The snow had fallen during the long night, during which children had pressed their faces to the windows, looking for a glimpse of a man who they suspected of bringing them wonderful gifts. But instead, they heard a terrible noise from a certain cottage in the neighboring arrondissement, a word which here means a place where something was being born. This cottage was already regarded with some suspicion, as it was the only place not decorated with flashing colored lights at this time of year. The thing that was being born was a latke, a word which here means the potato pancake. Latkes are a traditional part of the celebration of Hanukkah, a holiday commemorating a miraculous Jewish military victory. Nearly everything in this world is born screaming, and the latke was no exception. Even though the latke wasn't conceived and born the way you and I were conceived and born, but instead fashioned from grated potatoes, chopped onion, beaten eggs, and a dash or two of salt. Once the ingredients were properly mixed, the latke was slapped into a pan full of olive oil, heated to a very high temperature, and this is when it began to scream. Ah! The latke was suffering so much that he leapt out of the hot pan and out the window of the cottage and began to run screaming down the boulevard. Ah! This may seem like unusual behavior for a potato pancake, but this is a Christmas story in which things tend to happen that would never occur in real life. The latke ran past a row of flashing colored lights which hung from the rain gutters of less suspicious cottages. "What's all the ruckus?" the lights said in unison. "We are the ones who are supposed to be dominating the neighborhood with our cheerful glow." "I was just thrown into a pan of boiling oil," the latke decried in reply. "Can you believe it?" "Yes," said the flashing lights, "but we can't imagine why." "Because I'm a latke," said the latke. The olive oil reminds us of the oil used to rededicate the temple following the defeat of Antiochus at the hands of the Maccabees. The oil was only supposed to last for 1 night, but there was a miracle and it lasted for 8. Plus, frying makes my skin crispy and brown. "So you're basically hash browns?" said the flashing colored lights. "Maybe you can be served alongside the Christmas ham." "I'm not hash browns," cried the latke. "I'm something completely different." Ah! The latke rounded the corner and found himself face to face with a candy cane. which wrinkled its red and white nose at the Latke in distaste. "I'm trying to sprinkle the night air with my peppermint scent," the candy cane said. "Your mouth-watering smell, not to mention all that yelping, is spoiling the effect." "My mouth-watering smell is part of the cozy feeling of Hanukkah," the Latke replied. "It reminds us that things are better now than they were in 175 BCE, when my people were not allowed to practice their religion. In order to study the Torah, they had to hide out in caves, and when they heard the Greek soldiers approaching, they pretended that they were gambling with a small spinning top called a dreidel." "Sort of like Joseph and Mary hiding out in the manger," said the candy cane. "Someone should write a carol about you." "I'm not part of Christmas," cried the Latke. "It's a totally different thing." Ah! The screams of the Latke grew quieter and quieter as the pancake ran out of the village and into the surrounding forest. Its utter fury was unabated, a phrase which here means the Latke was still annoyed at the objects to whom it had spoken. But it was also quite tired, so it decided to rest for a few minutes beneath the branches of a little pine tree. The pine tree was napping, but woke up at the sound of an object plopping down at its feet. "Are you a present?" the pine tree asked. "Presents are pretty much the only thing allowed to sit beneath me during this time of year." The Latke sighed. "Presents aren't really a big part of Hanukkah," it said in a voice hoarse from screaming. "There's nothing wrong with giving gifts to loved ones, of course, but it's more important to light the candles for 8 consecutive nights to commemorate the miracle in the temple and the miracle of victory when you are thoroughly outnumbered and you don't give up hope." "Plus Santa Claus," said the pine tree. The Latke was too exhausted to scream. "Santa Claus has nothing to do with it," the Latke said. "Christmas and Hanukkah are completely different things." "Well, different things can often blend together," said the pine tree. "Let me tell you a funny story about pagan rituals." But before the pine tree could begin this story, a family came trooping through the snow, searching the forest carefully. "We shouldn't have waited until the last minute to get ready for the holiday," the father said, who was holding an axe. "We'll never find a good one." "You shouldn't give up hope," said the mother, and pointed to the pine tree. "Look, it's perfect," said the daughter. "Beautiful," agreed the son. "Such a marvelous shape," said the mother. "And its skin looks so crisp," said the father, who reached down and scooped up the Latke from the snow. "We'll need to reheat it, of course, but this will be perfect for Hanukkah dinner with the topping of applesauce or sour cream or even jam." "I'll refry it in the oil," said the mother, to remind us of the rededication of the temple. "And the triumph of the Maccabees over Antiochus," added the daughter. "And hiding in the caves all that time," the son chimed in. The father smiled down at the Latke in his mitten, and then he stared curiously at his other hand. "What was I thinking, bringing an axe?" he said to himself. The family strolled back to the village, walking past all the cottages with flashing colored lights, and smiling politely at the candy canes until they reached their home. The family carried the Latke into their own home, which was warm and cozy, and sat down at the table, which was lit with the flickering candles of a menorah, or Chanukiah, which is a branched candelabra designed specifically for the holiday. It's very frustrating not to be understood in this world. If you say one thing and keep being told that you mean something else, it can make you want to scream. But somewhere in the world, there's a place for all of us. Whether you are an electric form of decoration, a peppermint-scented sweet, a source of timber, or a potato pancake. On a cold, snowy night, everyone and everything should be welcomed somewhere. And the Latke was welcomed into a home full of people who understood what a Latke is and how it fits into this particular holiday. And then they ate it. Ah! The end. I love anything that Lemony Snicket writes, but one of the things I like about this book in particular, besides the silliness, is that it promotes the message that each of us has a place in the world. There will be people who will offer us understanding and support. It's fitting then that this month's Sharing the Collection will be with Big Brothers, Big Sisters, an organization dedicated to connecting children with caring adults who will understand and support them. Please join me in welcoming Jennifer Spitler, Executive Director of Big Brothers, Big Sisters of Washtenaw County, as she tells us more about this wonderful organization. Welcome, Jennifer.
It was even cuter the second time. Thank you for having me, and it's good to see you all this morning. It's nice to be out speaking to folks again. Big Brothers, Big Sisters is an organization that has been around for over 100 years and started in New York City when young men were showing up in a judge's courtroom. They were young men that were coming unhoused, and they were basically living on the street and scrapping for what they could find to survive. And he found this unacceptable, that they were showing up in court for this reason, and put adults in their lives so that they could find a better way and have the support that they needed to survive. And today we understand that as an alternative to the juvenile justice system. They would have ended up in the system had this judge not done that. And we see that as creating equity and empowerment for the young people that we serve today. Big Brothers Big Sisters of Washtenaw County is celebrating 30 years in our community. And in that time, we have made over 7,600 matches between volunteers and kids right here in Washtenaw County. And as I've reflected on my time with the organization, which spans 19 years, it really is countless little moments. We call them little moments, big magic. They're conversations that give kids an opportunity to feel that they belong, that they're seen, and that they are heard. Sometimes it's through opportunities and experiences, but I always say it's the time in the car that you spend with the kids, getting to the opportunities and experiences that really make a difference. And in that time, I've had many opportunities to reflect on the mentors in my life. As I'm sure many of you had those folks that I say they just live on our shoulder. They're in our heads. They're the folks that we turn to when we're trying to make a big decision, or when we're going through a tough time, or when we're looking for a little inspiration. They're the folks that have impacted us through our lives. And that's what we try to do for young folks. Give them opportunities and experiences, but also someone that teaches them the little lessons and leaves them with the nuggets that they can look back on, and that fuels them. I'm here today under the auspices of Share the Collection, which I'm very grateful, but I do ask if you also have some time to share. I think that it is really important, and probably now more than ever. I don't know that I've said that before in my 19 years. The last 20 months have been really, really hard on all of us, and I think kids really are getting back to school, getting back in the community, and we're seeing how hard that time of isolation has been on them. They need adults to walk next to them. They need folks to give them that time and attention. So if you have a little bit of time, and you like to explore and be in community with folks, spend some time learning about Big Brothers Big Sisters if you would, and we invite you to share our mission with your family and friends and learn a little bit more, and maybe walk that path with a young person. It really does take a village, and we hope that you'll join ours. So thank you for having us here this morning.
Thank you, Jennifer. We appreciate all that you and Big Brothers Big Sisters do to help the youth of this community connect with mentors. It is clear, like Jennifer said, that now more than ever, our support is important to help such an essential organization to our community. I hope that you will consider what gifts you are able to give to help Big Brothers Big Sisters fulfill their mission and vision. And if your gift is a financial one, I invite you to text UUAA to 73256 and select Share Collection to donate. You may also visit uuaa.org/giving or place your gift in the baskets. Also, as many of you are certainly aware, we are in the midst of our annual pledge drive, building our vision. And if you have not made your pledge yet, don't worry. It's not too late. However, we would really appreciate it if you can get those pledges in as soon as you are able. Ed Lynn, our interim administrator, has informed me that a 2022 budget report is due to be presented to the board in a couple of weeks. Your pledge is greatly needed for us to know how we are able to fund the many programs of this community. And now, as we move into our time of giving, I invite you to turn your attention to the screens on the chancel to view two word clouds which capture the gratitudes of those who participated in last week's services of Thanksgiving. Reverend Theresa asked us to think of someone and something that we are thankful for. She then compiled these responses and put together the two word clouds that you will see during the offertory. This is a great reminder of the collective gratitudes that we share, a visual representation of the practice of gratitude that we shared last week. Thank you. And now I invite you to rise in body or spirit as we say together our words of dedication. To the work of this congregation, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action, we dedicate our lives and these our offerings. Thank you.
Thank you. Today we gather together in community, just as countless generations have gathered before us. We come together to light candles because we refuse to let the light go out. It's a light that can hold us in our deepest moments of despair and our most triumphant moments of joy, in its warm embrace. It's a reminder that our sorrow is softened when there's someone to sit by our side, that our love is boundless when there's someone to meet our gaze. So today, let us light candles for both joy and pain, so that none of us holds these alone. We begin by lighting a candle for the pain. May this light hold all those who were affected by the Oxford High School shooting. For the young lives so unfairly lost. For their families who are facing a kind of pain for which there are no words. For the students and teachers and community members whose lives will be forever touched by this trauma. For the parents across our state who are processing their own grief, while trying to calm the fears of their children in the midst of countless new school shooting threats. May the light hold us all. May this light hold all those who continue to be affected by COVID, those who have lost loved ones, those who are facing a diagnosis, those who continue to battle long-haul COVID, those on the front lines of our healthcare system, those who live in fear because of health conditions. May the light hold us all. I invite you now into a couple of minutes of shared silence for all the pain not yet spoken. The diagnosis, the divorce, the job loss, the depression, whatever you might be struggling with, may the light hold us all. Now, let us light a candle for the joy. May this light hold all those who work for justice, in the courtrooms, in the office, in the classroom, in the churches, in the streets, in the daily conversations, in even the smallest act of beauty and resistance. May this light hold us all. May this light hold the intricate web of life itself, of which we are a part. The glitter of new snow, the impossibly tiny toes of a green tree frog, the whole body wiggle of a dog reunited with its person, the sound of water softly knocking against a wooden dock, the streak of the Milky Way across the night sky. May this light hold it all and remind us of our place in it. I invite you now into a minute of shared silence for all the joy not yet spoken, the new baby, the retirement, the final treatment, the hope of new love, the lunch with a friend, whatever joy, big or small, is filling your heart, may the light hold us all. Amen. Our reading this morning comes from the book called My Jewish Year by Abigail Pogerman. And as you might suspect, the holiday that she explores in this particular passage is Hanukkah. Sitting in the Chicago hospital room where my father-in-law Milton has often resided since November, crystallizes the meaning of Hanukkah. So many rabbis have talked to me about light, and I see it there. Milt's wife Phyllis and twin daughters Sharon and Fern never leave. They just sit, read, or play word games on their iPhones. Phyllis is unbeatable at Scrabble. They worry and chat, knit and parse blood pressure readings and dialysis cycles. They don't tire or grow restless. They just stay. When my husband Dave and I fly in from New York with our children during Hanukkah, we all camp out at the hospital too. As I watch Milton battle a failing kidney in his green patient gown, all the Hanukkah metaphors rush to mind. The miracle of the oil lasting one more day. The miracle of doctors who keep trying. The miracle of family that never leaves your side. Each person who shows up at the hospital, niece, brother-in-law, friend, seems like another candle, and the room grows palpably brighter with each new arrival. My mother-in-law, Phyllis, leans over to me at dinner one night after we leave the hospital and says, "I can see the difference in Milt when everyone is there." We add another candle to the menorah that night when we get home to her condo on a golf course. I've read so many teachings about adding the light on this Chag Urim, Festival of Lights, how we illuminate the darkest time of year and trust that there will be a brighter day. Jews light lights not to banish the darkness, writes Rabbi Barbara Penzer in A Guide to Jewish Practice, but to be reminded of the miracles of everyday life. The next morning, Milt regales us with his dramatic dream of a night before about two planes, one loaded with nuclear weapons, and the conundrum of whether to shoot down one, both, or none. Then he goes on to deconstruct the American folk ballad, "Oh, My Darling Clementine." I watch my children, Ben and Molly, draw him out, encourage his narrative, however disjointed. They make sure he feels taken seriously. My husband even asks follow-up questions, which Milt is eager to answer. It's a long yarn, and we have plenty of time. We add another candle that night. I call Rabbi Michal Springer to ask her about the Hanukkah light, specifically the dispute between ancient rabbis, the rabbis Hillel and Shammai, over how to properly light a menorah. Hillel's approach, which virtually every Jew follows today, adds one candle each night to build up to 8. Shammai, by contrast, lights all 8 candles at once on the first night and decreases one each day to end up with 1. While I've only known the Hillel way, adding candles, Michal prefers Shammai's, subtracting. Shammai reminds me that we treasure the light for as long as it remains without needing to pretend that it's going to last forever, Springer says. I summon her words during Milt's waning days as I write my Hanukkah dispatch. We treasure the light for as long as it remains, having no idea that 2 months later, he'll be gone. The menorah itself offers another Milt metaphor. Jews usually light Hanukkah candles in a cluster of family or friends. A menorah gathers us, and so does a sick parent. Every night of Hanukkah, says Michal, according to Shammai, we're witnessing that there's less light, but the people are still together, night after night. And the diminishment of light is possible or tolerable because of the people being together. There's a commitment to not walking away that brings the light. As the light is dimmed, the people keep coming back. And so we do. We keep returning to Milt, even when he's moved from hospital to nursing home to hospice. We are there for the diminishment of the light. In the past few weeks, I've been reflecting on joy in preparation for this month's theme. And I noticed that my mind kept strangely going back to a very hard time in my family's life. Many years ago, my sister's husband, Michael, was killed in a tragic car accident, leaving my sister and their 2 teenage sons devastated. They eventually rebuilt wonderful lives, thankfully, but the pain of that time left its mark on us all. I wasn't sure why that story would come up again and again when I thought about joy, because I cannot think of a less joyful time. But something, call it spirit, call it subconscious, kept pushing me to re-examine it. I speak to my sister each day, and so during one of our conversations, I asked her if she was willing to share whether she had experienced any joy during that time. And without hesitation, she began to share so many memories and stories. The 2 things Michael was most passionate about were his family and sports. So he had coached all the kids' sports teams growing up. He had also touched the lives of so many friends, family members, coworkers, and community members. She reminded me that so many people came to the funeral, they had to form a line that stretched out of the building and down the sidewalk. The funeral director said he had never seen anything like it. A big part of that line were all the boys, from the ages of 18 down to 12, that he had coached over the years. After the funeral, the older boys he coached even went on to sleep on her couch and on the floor every night for 2 weeks to make sure that she and the boys were okay. Those kinds of moments had brought her and my nephews so much healing, and yes, even joy. As she shared, other beautiful memories came back to me as well. Memories of people coming out of the woodwork to offer all kinds of help. Memories of connecting with extended family members and friends I hadn't seen in years. Memories of watching my giant teenage nephews hold my tiny daughter, who was a toddler at the time, in their arms with such tenderness. Or the way her playfulness and innocence made everyone's grief soften as she passed by during the funeral. Reflecting back, I realized that we all had moments of joy at that time, but over the years, I had subconsciously chosen to only remember the trauma and grief. All along, there was a different choice I could have made if I had stopped long enough to reflect on it. I also knew that there was another choice I could make because I had made it before, even in the midst of a hard time. For example, during the shutdown last year, I, like all of you, was being bombarded by horrible news. And a good portion of the people closest to me were flooding my texts and emails and phone calls with outrage, anxiety, despair, statistics. I could see myself and others going through all the various stages of grief, sometimes all of them at the same time in the course of an hour. And then one day I felt something powerful welling up inside of me, something I hadn't yet felt during the shutdown. I thought, the anger stage. But even the label anger wasn't quite accurate. It was something that pulsed in my veins like an electric current. I knew that just as actual electricity can be used as a source of power or a source of destruction, I had a choice about what to do next. So what I did was take a shower. I had nowhere to go, of course, but I continued to take daily showers because the routine helped me cope. And part of that routine also involved listening to music while I got ready, usually just a playlist put on random shuffle. That day, however, I knew that I needed something very specific. So I found the most energetic, obnoxious pop song I could possibly find and blasted it as loud as I could without getting too many complaints from my children. And then as the water poured down, I danced hard. Now, just as a side note, I don't recommend this because dancing in a slippery shower is very dangerous. But it did remind me that there's a good reason that people throughout time and in every culture have used rhythmic dancing, singing, and drumming, not only to celebrate the happiest times, but also to survive the hardest times. Rhythmic motion and sound are shown to help heal trauma because they connect us to our own heartbeats, to one another, and to the natural rhythms of the world. They regulate our nervous system. There was another reason I needed to dance, though. I needed to show myself that I could choose joy, and not just any joy, a fierce joy, a stubborn joy. Things were hard, really, really hard. But life was also beautiful and fragile and weird and wondrous. So for that moment, at least, I refused to be bowed or broken by despair. After that experience, I made sure that we got dressed and took a walk every day, often in places that we had never been before, just for the change of scenery. About 90% of our walks involved my children complaining about being on a walk. But that other 10% made all the difference. We also made it one of our spiritual practices to watch a new YouTube show at the time called Some Good News, hosted by the actor John Krasinski. Yes, thank you. Still worth watching, I highly recommend. It's a collection of short videos from the internet highlighting all the ordinary good things that were happening all across the world. An elderly husband who sat outside in the cold every day so that his wife, who was quarantined with COVID inside the nursing home, could at least see him through the window. A family recreating a missed prom in their living room for their teenage daughter. A UPS driver dancing through the neighborhood and waving at people through the windows. I chose to keep up on the most important facts about the devastation of COVID and the pain in the world in general. But I also chose to keep up on these moments of beauty and compassion. Of course, there were and continue to be plenty of times when I couldn't choose a fierce joy. Times when I went down a news rabbit hole of despair, or curled up on the couch and watched too much Netflix, or lashed out at people who didn't deserve it. And many people in the world are facing much harder circumstances than I am, including struggles with mental health that don't always make it possible to choose joy. But when it is possible, fierce joy is a powerful tool for resilience, a path to possibility. One of the reasons that joy in general is such an important practice is that unlike happiness, it doesn't depend on your external circumstances, and it doesn't ignore the hardness of life. Joy recognizes that beauty, humor, love, and connection live side by side with violence, pain, grief, and disconnection. But the heart can be expanded to hold both. As Robin Wall Kimmerer, the brilliant author of the book Braiding Sweetgrass, puts it, even a wounded world is feeding us. Even a wounded world holds us, giving us moments of wonder and joy. I choose joy over despair, not because I have my head in the sand, but because joy is what the earth gives me daily, and I must return the gift. Recognizing the gifts of joy we are given and offering them back, recognizing that even in the darkest times we can find a spark of light and help it to grow by sharing it. These are, of course, the themes of this whole holiday season. This year, my family has chosen to honor this season by celebrating Hanukkah for the first time. I have a lot of Jewish heritage, but my family did not practice it growing up because they had converted to Mormonism. But I've always loved learning about Judaism and have occasionally attended services at Reform congregations. This year, I decided to learn about it even more deeply and have our family celebrate some Jewish holidays. I have to say that since we already celebrate Christmas, winter solstice, the Scandinavian holiday of St. Lucia's Day, and 2 family birthdays, all in the month of December, adding Hanukkah has been a bit of a logistical challenge. But it has been worth it for so many reasons, including that, for me, this holiday is truly about celebrating fierce joy. For example, in the second book of Maccabees, the story of the first Hanukkah focuses on its connection to Sukkot. Since they had been banned from practicing their religion and had been living in the mountains, the Jewish community hadn't been able to celebrate Sukkot. This is a holiday that's honored in the fall traditionally and commemorates the 40 years that the Jewish people spent in the desert on their way to the Promised Land, after escaping slavery in Egypt. When the Maccabees achieved victory against Antiochus and were able to reclaim the temple, they found it was in shambles. But undeterred, they cleaned and repaired it and decided to celebrate a belated Sukkot. They couldn't reclaim all that had been lost, but they could go back and honor this one missed holiday. Sukkot not only celebrated their ancestors' journey through the Promised Land, but also the fact that that journey ended with the first dedication of the temple. So it was fitting that they could now reclaim this holiday as they rededicated the temple once again. It was an act of defiance. It was an act of joy. Later in the Babylonian Talmud, another element was added to the Hanukkah story, the miracle of the oil. In this story, when the Maccabees returned to reclaim the temple, they wanted to light the menorah, but they could only find one small jar of oil. It wasn't enough to last more than a day, but they lit it anyway. The fact that it went on to burn for 8 nights is supposed to be the miracle. But for me, the real miracle is that they lit it at all. They made a choice to celebrate what light they did have, even when it seemed hopeless. As the author of our reading put it, there's a commitment to not walking away that brings the light. In these hard, uncertain, sometimes seemingly unbearable times, may we make that same commitment to not walk away, to light even the smallest light. Because at the end of the day, there are still teenage boys piled up like puppies on the floor to protect the grieving. There are toddlers who hold up sticky hands to touch your face in the middle of a funeral. There are spouses holding vigil outside a window. There are songs to dance to in the shower. There are people digging through the rubble just to find a little bit of oil. Miracles everywhere. Joy everywhere. May we choose that. Prepare to end our time together, I invite you to rise in body or in spirit. We come now to the time when we extinguish our lights, but let us remember that the light never truly goes out. Each of us carries a piece of it out into the week, out into our own lives. Sometimes it will burn bright and hot, and sometimes it will seem like it would take a miracle to get through the night. The truth is that light is always there waiting for us. May we tend our flames with hope and a fierce joy until we gather again. May it be so, and happy Hanukkah.